Hey, it's Kate Kripke, and welcome to the Motherhood Uncut podcast. Here we are committed to making sure that nobody ever needs to mother alone. We bring to you, wherever you are, the conversations that we need to have to survive and thrive in motherhood, but so often keep silent about. The things that make us laugh, cry, celebrate, rage about, and reflect on. The things that bring tears of sorrow and tears of joy, confusion and wonder, fear and gratitude. We want you to feel good about your mothering and to feel supported along the often clunky adventure of life as a mom. In Motherhood Uncut, you can expect eye-opening conversations with experts in parenting, mental health, and women's health, as well as moving and inspiring conversations with moms who are out there paving the way for their children. You'll likely agree with some of what you hear and also disagree with some of what you hear. All we ask is this, that you come with an open mind and boatloads of compassion for yourself and mothers everywhere. Pull up a chair, pour yourself a glass of wine or a cup of tea, put on your walking or running shoes, turn up the volume in your car during your commute or the pickup line at school. Just show up and mother with us. We have got you. Hey, it's Kate, and I have no doubt that you are going to be as moved as I was by this conversation today that I had with Kelley Coleman. Kelley is a mom of two boys, one of whom has very rare disabilities, and she tells us her story today about what it was like to learn of her kiddo's disabilities and really raise him to become the incredible young man that he is today, along with his brother. We really get into it today. We talk about things that are deep, heartfelt challenges, things that are incredibly moving. We've got some humor in here for you. It's an episode you don't want to miss. So as always, grab up a chair, pull up a chair, and come mother with us. Hey listeners, so this is the last week that you can sign up for my 2024-2025 year-long Take the Leap program, and we only have a couple of spots left. This course is for you if you're feeling an itch to grow and expand your purpose outside of motherhood. You are the perfect addition to this small cohort of 10 women. If you're ready to return to work but want to do something new, if you're wanting to up-level professionally, or perhaps start your own gig doing something that you have always dreamed of doing, or perhaps you're committed to finding a way to working part-time and aren't sure how to bring that to fruition, or maybe you have something inside of you that is calling to be shared with the greater world, paid or unpaid, and you're feeling scared and unsure of yourself. Or maybe that goal that you have is more internal, to learn to love yourself, to get healthier, to deepen a relationship. Whatever it is, here's the thing. We know that the only true reflection of failure is not trying. The question to consider here is, what is the cost of not doing that thing that you're dreaming of? Ashley Wick and I believe so much in this program that we're offering a money-back guarantee if you participate and don't end up on some spectacular place at the end. There is literally nothing to lose. So link to learn more and to apply is in the show notes. But time is running out and application deadline is May 1st. So all you need to do is send in an application. Once we receive that application, we'll book a free call with you where we're going to give you a little coaching about whatever it is that you're wanting to do and also help you decide if you're a right fit. So don't waste any time. Go and apply right now. Motherhood Uncut podcast is sponsored by the One Clock. This is a clock that is actually like one of those clocks that you're going to forever thank. The One Clock is built all on wake science. What is the best way for your nervous system to wake up in the morning? And with the help of researchers, Grammy award-winning musicians, and a whole lot of beautiful style, this One Clock is a sure way to get you back on track towards health and wellness. You can learn more at oneclock.co. Hi, Kelley.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited for our conversation.
I am so excited to talk with you. And for our listeners, one of the things that happens so often for us in this podcast is that we get these email requests. You know, they come in all the time of people's assistants or people's managers or people themselves suggesting a topic, suggesting a perspective or a topic or a place of wisdom or a work that they think that our audience would benefit from. And every once in a while, a real zinger comes in, a real winner comes in. And that's not to say that everyone has something to offer, but we are pretty specific and intentional about the conversations that we have here. And I think it was your assistant first, Kelley, that sent us that email. It was like from the moment that came in, we were like, yes. And then I did some due diligence and went back and listened to some of your previous podcasts and the way you approach your topics and you as a person. And I was like, this is our gal. So thank you for taking some time. I'm going to turn the torch to the torch. I'm going to turn the mic to you in just a moment, but just for our listeners, let me just introduce you briefly before we go into the underneath layers of who you are. But Kelley Coleman is a feature film development executive turned author and advocate for parent caregivers and individuals with disabilities. And this is a big part that we're going to talk about today is what is it like to raise a child with a disability and how does that kind of universal human experience connect you to moms everywhere. So we're going to talk a lot about that. Kelley has a book, Everything No One Tells You About Parenting a Disabled Child, Your Guide to the Essential Systems, Services, and Support. We're going to link that in the show notes, and I'm sure we'll dive into some of the pieces that come up for you in that book. I think a lot of people, by the way, can often not know what to do with the reality of having a child with disabilities, and especially those moms who are just getting this information, right? So we might have women who have been at this for a while and have found some systems and some ways of moving through life with a child with disability. And then we have moms who are listeners who are curious or wondering if something's going on or just received some sort of more clinical or diagnostic information. So I know that you're going to jump into that. This book you wrote draws upon over a decade of experience, including her own experience parenting a child with multiple disabilities. Kelley lives in Los Angeles with her husband, 2 boys, and her son's trusty service dog. Welcome, Kelley.
Yes, thank you again. As you were speaking, literally the clouds parted and rays of sunshine came in. So clearly this is a sign that this is a great conversation that the two of us need to be sitting down and having. So thank you.
You're welcome. And again, it's one of my talking with women like you is one of my favorite things to do. So thank you for the time. Let's start, Kelley, by you just telling us who you are and why you're here on this podcast talking to me today. So I guess the more specific question I'm asking just to get started is what has your mothering journey been in a nutshell? Because we could take our entire time talking about that. But what got you to where you are today? Tell us your mothering story.
As you were asking that question, I was quickly thinking of what is the succinct answer of what has my mothering journey been.
Yeah.
And the first thing that popped into my head was chaos and beauty.
There you are. There's the both and, right? There it is.
That is kind of the ultimate both and. My mothering journey started with our older son, Sean, who is now 12, who does not have any disabilities and is hilarious and academic and creative and all the things. And his younger brother, Aaron, who's now 10 years old, is hilarious and unique and wonderful in all of his ways. He also has multiple disabilities. When our first son was born and he was, let's stereotype for a moment, an easy baby. And we're like, oh, our kid sleeps and he eats and he was talking way before anybody else. And we're such good parents. We have this all figured out because clearly this was all our doing.
Isn't it funny how we do that, by the way? Like we project everything we feel about ourselves onto our children and
Yes.
everything that's happening for them onto us. It's like we're
Yes.
such good parents because
Yes.
as if the definition of being a good parent was having an easy child.
Yes. Wouldn't that be nice? Or no, I guess it wouldn't be nice because then I would have gone from I am the most amazing parent ever to I am useless. we have Sean, who started talking at 10 months old before he even had hair or teeth. And then we have Aaron, who is equally as incredible and awesome and fun and all the great things. Aaron has multiple disabilities. And at age 10, we are still working on his communication system, which doesn't include verbal speech, but, a device and pointing and gestures and sounds and all the things. I knew from day one, just the mom gut feeling, something's going on.
Yeah.
And nobody believed me for a while. Um, which is scary and gaslighty. And plus you've got all the pregnancy hormones and recovery and all of that, plus a toddler, plus a baby who sleeps too much, which sounds ridiculous, but we knew he was sleeping way too much. I was having to wake him up to eat. That was a struggle. And we started eventually putting all these pieces in place that have added up to he's a happy, healthy 10-year-old with a yet undiagnosed genetic syndrome. And within that umbrella, we have autism, epilepsy, cerebral palsy, cortical vision impairment, microcephaly, feeding tube, sensory, cognitive processing. Like, he is an overachiever. He's like, I'm just going to check all the boxes. And within that, we still don't have our overall diagnosis, despite having done every test that science has available. So it turns out awesome parenting doesn't just mean your kid is easy. Awesome parenting means getting to know your kid as they are.
Oh,
And
wait, pause. I mean, it like brought tears to my eyes. Can you say that again? Awesome parenting is what?
is not about having an easy kid. It's about getting to know your kid as they are.
Awesome parenting is about getting to know your kid as they are. Dang, I love that.
I just came up with that. That's good. I'm gonna write that down.
It's not only good, and I'm sure I'm sure we'll maybe circle back to this. It's sort of the only way to feel like a good mom. And we all want to feel like good moms, right?
We do. We really want that.
I'm going to circle back to that. So sorry to interrupt you, but that was so good. So good, Kelley. Okay.
And I'm gonna underline, you're so good that you just said and I'm gonna start crying. I'm a crier. We all want to feel like really good moms. I felt like a great mom with my first kid. With my second kid, I almost immediately felt like a failure.
Yes.
And only recently did someone put a name to that feeling that I had for months, that I described as, I felt like I'm just falling into this bottomless pit. As I felt inadequate. My kid didn't have any vision because of his cortical processing, and I felt inadequate. He had to get a feeding tube. I didn't know anything. I'd never heard of a feeding tube. I felt inadequate. Every turn, and the paperwork and the social services and the insurance, and like at every single turn, I felt inadequate. And I'm going to cry. All I was hearing over and over was, I am so sorry.
Yes.
And that is all anyone says to you. And even the people who don't say anything, they give you that look of pity and like, oh, you poor thing. And I'm like, can somebody just tell me that my baby has amazing hair? Because he has amazing hair. Like,
You
that's
know
all I
what,
want to hear.
Kelley, there's so much gold here. I have a feeling our whole conversation is going to be filled with gold and we're not going to get to all the nuggets, but you know, this inadequacy, this sort of like feeling like a failure really comes for this idea that if we know what we're doing and if we're doing it well, and if we're good mothers, our children will sleep. Our babies will eat when they're supposed to. Our babies and children will start speaking at a certain age, or they will look you in the eye, or they will laugh when they're quote unquote supposed to laugh, and will cry when they're quote unquote supposed to cry, but also will stop crying when they're
Yes.
supposed to stop crying, when we do the right things to get them to stop crying. So if we could just take that for a moment and look at how much of a setup that is for us to care more about quote unquote getting it right and knowing what to do and getting our kids to do the quote unquote right things. We care more about that than knowing our kid as they are. We care more about control than connection.
Yes.
And whether you're a mom with a kid with multiple disabilities, like you were with Erin, or a mom with a kid who on paper is quote unquote normal. Don't like that word, but I'm just going to use it because
Yep.
it's a layperson word.
Yep.
Whether or not, it's not about the thing outside of us that's happening that leads to us feeling so awful and so inadequate and like such a failure. It's how we're perceiving those things and ourselves in relation to them. Now, that's a big concept. So we're going to have to get it a little more clear for folks, but that's what we're talking about, right?
That is absolutely what we are talking about. And I think, circling back to the universality of all of this, many of your listeners, certainly no one has a kid with my kid syndrome because there might not be anyone else in the world.
Sure.
But that is such a commonality of this feeling of we have to get it right and we're working so hard to get it right. I have
Yeah.
a kid who literally has never eaten food.
Yeah. Right.
And no matter how hard I try, he's going to choose to not keep eating food.
So if you based your sense of success on how you felt as a mom on whether or not he was eating food, excuse my language, but you'd be fucked.
100%.
Can I ask you a question? So back in the early days when Erin was a baby, and everyone kept saying, "I'm sorry, I'm so sorry, I'm so sorry," and you felt so much emotion when you said that, and I think it's very clear now, and will become more clear the more we get to know you, why that statement was so painful. But what was the message you were hearing behind those words? I'm so sorry.
The message that I was hearing, which is not how I feel now, the message I was hearing is disability is the worst thing that could happen to your family.
Mm.
Your child is a tragedy. And you just sit there and that's not true. Most of us have no experience with disability going into this. So, of course, I was coming from this rotten place of ignorance. So, I didn't know anything. And you're taking this all in. And your episode about mom rage connected with me so much. I was literally on a walk with my dog and like crying as I'm walking down the busy streets. And you're talking about all of these things that we bury. And as a mom of a kid with disabilities, even before we know what they are and we're just even questioning or wondering or whatever it is, you bury all of that. Because there's also this expectation that you have to carry the torch that I am thrilled about this. This is great. I got this. Everything is terrific.
All or nothing, either or, right?
All or nothing, because that's what we're supposed to do as moms and as women.
Yes.
And there is no, when you have a child that requires 24/7 care, you can't escape into the other room to scream into a pillow.
Yeah.
And where does that all even go?
Yeah.
And there is so much that I think most of us don't even know that we are dealing with and processing and internalizing because it is so constant And the day to day can be so all consuming when your kid is randomly throwing up 5 or 6 times a day, when your kid is having seizures, you're calling 911, the feeding tube supply company didn't deliver things, you're arguing with insurance, when it is constant and the only thought when you do have a break is sleep. Many moms especially never get a chance to process all of this that has come in, and there may not be a healthy way to let it out and process. And it just sucks so much joy out of things in such an unnecessary way when everybody's just saying, I'm so sorry about your baby.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, what I hear you describing, Kelley, is not just a trauma. Of course, there's a lot of physical traumas that your son went through and that you went through in relationship to your son, but there's a real psychic trauma here.
Mhm.
And when the nurse or the person says, I'm so sorry, it comes from this belief that you said just a moment ago. I'm so sorry that your life is ruined.
Yes.
I'm so sorry that you have this tragedy to deal with for the rest of your life. So, but I'm curious, to me, that statement comes from someone who hasn't been there.
Mhm.
Because you would never say, if you met a mom tomorrow that had a son with multiple disabilities, you would never say, I'm so sorry, right? If that nurse, that person that had been speaking with you, had gone through this and gotten to the place that you are, and I want us to dive in today about
Mhm.
what the story has been from then till now, because clearly you've taken the reality of your situation and you now know your son as he is and are embracing that. Something's helped you get there. So I want to talk about that. But if this nurse had been there, what would she have said to you instead of, I'm so sorry?
She would have said, I believe you. She would have said, I hear you. How are you feeling? Certainly when if I meet someone at the park and I see where they tell me their child is disabled, I don't say I'm sorry. I also don't say congratulations, because it is so rotten to be the person in the center of the emotional circle when everybody else is dumping their emotions into you.
Yes.
And there is so much stress, and I will name it as trauma, but please correct me if I'm not naming it properly, of feeling for years that you are having to manage everyone else's fragile emotions. However I feel about the situation, I just need to be validated in that. I don't need you to tell me, oh, my cousin's kid took this supplement and now he's cured. Nope. I don't need you to say, congratulations, I have a disabled kid and it's the best thing ever, because that also might not be the emotion that's resonating with me. I just need, it's also okay to say, I don't know what to say. So I'm going to sit here with you.
You know what's striking, Kelley, as you talk about this, is we started this conversation today with this profound mic drop. Being a good mom means that, and again, quotes around that term, right? I think we said awesome mothering. So being a good mom or awesome mothering is getting to know your kids as they are. Being an awesome friend is getting to know your friend who's the mother that has a child with multiple or even one disability as they are. Being the awesome nurse is getting to know your patient as they are, which has nothing to do with what you're feeling and everything to do with making space and being curious about what's happening for the other person without making assumptions. And not, to your point, that statement, I mean, we see this all the time, right? We see this with women who have miscarriages and then become pregnant. We see this with, whatever, all kinds of situations that can be considered as big losses or grief or trauma. And people will try to say something to make sure that the other person doesn't feel bad. As if they have that power, A, and B, as if it's wrong or bad to feel bad.
Yes, absolutely. And I think we as humans, and certainly as moms, of kids with disabilities, we need to be validated in whatever the things are that we are feeling, because that is real to me. And if you say, oh, don't feel sad, or well, at least, or whatever thing is that you're about to say to me, what you're saying to me is, it's not okay for you to feel this way. And then what my brain is doing is say, cool, I'm just going to bury this in and I'm just not going to share this with people. And you are making me feel worse by trying to tell me not to feel this way.
That's right. Oh, so much. So before we talk about everything you've learned from this, and you said awesome mothering is getting to know your kid as they are. I actually would love to learn more about Erin. I would love for us to hear, because sometimes we hear the lay person, right? The general public will hear kid with multiple disabilities and hear everything that you mentioned and only hear that. And I think it's a really beautiful opportunity for us to hear more about Erin and all of his Erin-ness. So I want to hear about that too. But you did say something early on that I'm really curious about. So you said, I knew that there was something happening and no one believed me. One of the things that I talk a lot about in my work, Kelley, with moms, is the difference between intuition and anxiety. And a lot of times in my work, I have mothers, women who are pregnant, or women who have small kids who have a fear-based sense that there's something wrong. The what if thinking, the kind of hyper analyzing, all the things, and that comes from, and many of us, without even realizing it, that comes with an assumption that there must be something wrong, right? That there's no way my child could be okay. And of course, that might have a lot of older limiting beliefs about them and the world, all that stuff, right? But that hyper analyzing, anxiety, obsessive type mental health challenge, that's not intuition. So we can get confused about the difference between anxiety and intuition. So I'm curious if you could speak a little bit more to this experience you were having about just knowing. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
My pleasure. And no one has ever asked me this before. So thank you for asking this. And also, as if your listeners don't know, please internalize this. If you are not sure if it is intuition or anxiety, or if you're like, whoa, I got a lot of anxiety, when you can talk to other trusted people, be sure it's someone who you're trusting. If Aunt Sally is going to make you feel worse, don't talk to her about this. But anxiety is so real, and it is not your fault, and it is not always within your control. So lean into those who can help you to determine, is this intuition? Is this anxiety? Because then you can deal with what are the facts that are on the table and how those things are playing into this.
Yes. And one more thing I want to add to that, just to sort of set you up. I'm going to tee you up, because the way I talk about this is intuition isn't anxious.
Correct.
Intuition is a knowing. It's just a knowing. It's not a what if. Oh, it's not a ruminating about all the what ifs that then speed up our heart rate and make us not think clearly. It's actually the opposite. It is a clarity of thought. It is just a knowing. So it feels different in our body. Intuition feels different in our body than anxiety feels. That's how I often talk about it. You're nodding, so it sounds like that resonates for you.
That resonates so much. And the word that I use to describe that feeling, and especially at that particular moment in time, I was so grounded in that thought.
Yeah.
And I wasn't trying to convince myself of yes or no, or is this right or wrong.
Yeah.
It was such a grounded and clear thought.
Yeah.
And something that was so meaningful and frankly probably saved my child's life was our pediatrician, who works with many types of kids. She is not specific to kids with disabilities. And I kept telling her this and this feeling of intuition. And she said, all of the tests we're doing are checking out that say that he's fine. That said, you can show up in our office as often as you need. We will never discount you. We will never tell you to leave. We will always see you, and we will always see your child, and we will always listen to you.
What did that do for you?
Everything. The validation
Yeah.
of, even if I am making this all up, someone will walk that path with me.
Beautiful.
And whether that is your pediatrician, your local librarian, your best friend, your partner, your parent, like whomever, find that person who will listen to you and run the tests if they need to be run. We'll do the exact same things over again. So that when, I'm going to cry again, when we showed up in her office with my baby and my toddler, who was making pretend cupcakes in the exam room chair, and we ate pretend cupcakes for a very long office visit. When I told her, here is how much he is eating, she believed me. I wrote down times and amounts and the things, and she believed me, just as she said she would. And we were checked into the hospital that night. The feeding tube was placed that night. And here I go. This is hard. The drive to the hospital was both terrifying and such a relief, because I knew this was coming. I didn't know what it would look like,
Yes.
but getting to the hospital and the tubes and the specialists and the nurses and the brain scan and like all the things, it felt exactly how you imagine it feels. And it was also a sense of relief that I now realize was the first, like, we are going to whack away at this inadequacy, because here's a literal team of people who will help you and who will believe you and who will put a feeding tube in your kid because he needs to live.
Wow.
Oh,
Wow.
and by the way, feeding tubes sound horrifying if you've never heard of them, and they're actually no big deal. Which
Well,
is
isn't that amazing? I mean, here, one of the first things I felt about you, even before we met face to face, but I was sort of listening to some other podcasts you've done, is the strength, the internal, not the facade, but the internal strength that comes from resilience.
yes.
And this last statement is a very clear example of that. This, like, a feeding tube is not that big of a deal. I mean, humans are our capacity for resilience is amazing. Before you'd become a mother, if someone had said to you, Kelley, your second baby, these are all the things, you'd be like, I can't handle that. A feeding tube, I can't. And here you are with so much resilience because of what you've moved through.
Mhm.
It's really moving.
Thank you. And there are so many mothers and parents and partners who have similar stories or who are on this path. And also, there is no like hierarchy of disability. And if you're listening to this and saying, oh, well, my kid only has X or Y or Z, then, oh, my kid's not quote unquote as disabled, so I shouldn't feel bad, or, oh, she's got it worse. Nope. Like my kid, both of them. And it's important to talk about both of my children.
Yes, yes. Thank you for saying that.
They're
Totally.
for real. Like they wake up and they are happy to be in the world and they're awesome humans and a pleasure to have around. And even with all of our stuff, sometimes our day-to-day is really hard, but most days it's busy and it's constant and it's exhausting, but it is joyful and beautiful and all of the things, because disability, just like any other thing, is all the things.
Kelley, so you have just given us a little peephole into current day life in Kelley Coleman's home. And in many ways, you're describing a very typical home, right? You're describing all the stuff. We got good days and bad days. We have messiness and organization. We have laughter and tears. We have busy where I'm exhausted and downtime. You're really describing what most families are at their core, which is all of it.
Yes.
Right. So your pediatrician heard you, she believed you, you went to the hospital, there was a team there, they took action, you felt this beautiful combination between fear
A
and
lot of that.
uncertainty and anxiety and grief and relief. So here's that, oh, we can feel all things at once. And then things begin to happen differently. So your life was no longer around trying to get people to listen to you and trying to get people to understand that what you knew was happening was really happening. You didn't know what it was, but that something was. Okay, now you're moving in another direction. So we could spend forever here, but if you could just tell us a bit about what that period of your life was like for you.
That period was really hard. Loving my son is never hard. That was never the hard piece. Um, whether or not your kid is disabled, that's not the tough part. The tough part is whether it's the internalized ableism and the feelings of inadequacy, and then all of the systems and the paperwork and the therapies and the fights and the trying to get in to see this office and figure out if this service is worth us paying out of pocket for, and the how do I make a future care plan for a child who at this point at age 10 I can say he will never live independently. um all of that stuff while you're trying to maintain a child's livelihood who has medical needs, while you are trying to also be a good mom to both of them, and here's my toddler and drive to preschool and have conversations with my husband on occasion, who was terrific, but in many cases, it is one parent and most often the mom who takes on the role of parent caregiver. And parent caregiver are two very different roles.
Hmm.
And for many of us, parent caregiver is a role that it gets handed to us with no training, no experience, no knowledge, and we suddenly find ourselves doing it full time and for forever.
Yeah.
And so figuring that piece out of how do I do this full time and forever?
Yeah.
And I'm only recently figuring out, and I also want to still be my own person within that.
Yeah.
It's a lot.
Yes, it is. I love that distinction you're making between what did you call it? Full-time parent
Caregiver.
caregiver. Yeah. It's such an interesting look at the different ways we show up and are required to show up given the roles that we play in our family. And that's a whole other topic of podcast episode. We might have to have you back for that one, but it's a really interesting look at that. So during this time, you mentioned Sean, your first son. One of the things that I know happens for many people is there can become this feeling of guilt, this feeling of either a real or perceived experience of imbalance, right? Where the kid who's got the challenges gets all the attention, and then the kid who's easy, right? I loved how you said, you sort of caught that.
In air quotes for everyone who's
Yeah,
listening.
exactly. Easy. Because that kid's so easy, he doesn't need the same. So that kid might get left sort of in the corner. We see this happen in schools all the time, right? But this is a real thing for families when there is one child who has some form of special needs, whatever that is, and another who doesn't. How did you navigate that?
You said that in past tense, but I think it's more appropriate to say,
Of
how
course,
are you
good
navigating that?
question.
Because
Yeah,
that's
of course.
forever. Right?
Of course.
No apology. No apologies. We don't do that.
But it's such a good, it's funny, I don't even think I said sorry. But I think it's such a good recognition, I think, for all of this conversation, is that all of these things you're talking about are everyday things.
Yes.
So none of this is past tense. So how do you navigate that with Sean?
Number one, to pat ourselves on the back, is by getting to know him as he is.
It's the same thing. It's the
Same
same exact thing.
We don't need 200 parenting tips. Let's just do one. Getting to know him as he is and trying to the fullest extent possible to be aware of what he needs, when he needs it, and when and how those needs change, which is a lot, but also resting in the fact that I'm taking my cues from him. We have talked about all of this from a very early age. Our boys, fortunately, are very close and they love each other. Sean was 19 months old when Aaron was born. They don't remember anything other than driving hours for therapy appointments and all of the things. This is just life. And so that, I think, has been a component that has facilitated this. I'm very fortunate, and it's a tremendous privilege that I'm married. My husband is tremendously involved in all the things. And we are able to take individual time with each kid. And I do the thing Aaron wants with him. Sean does the thing with his dad, like we switch. But creating that, one super specific thing we did many years ago, which has been such a delight for all of us. And the whole point of it was, Sean, we are validating you and who you are and what you are interested in. We called it the Curiosity Book. And each page is a blank and clear plastic sleeve, and we wrote on top of pieces of paper, I'm curious about. And Sean would draw these pictures of lots of different types of swords or Legos or pirates or chemistry or the digestive system, like whatever it is over the years. And that's just what we declared that month is. He gets to choose. And if it is dragons for 6 months in a row, great. If it is dragons and then eyeballs and then types of moving water, like whatever it is. And then we'll say, oh, we're going to go to the library or the beach or a museum or like whatever it is. And the whole point of that isn't like we're creating stuff to do. It's you are telling us what you are interested in, and we are telling you that we are interested in you.
Oh gosh, it's so beautiful. And I'm reminded when you're talking about this that curiosity is always going to be the magic key. And you really have approached your entire mothering journey with both your sons from a place of curiosity.
Yes. And if we could, to speak very big picture, approach disability
Yes.
from a place of, I am curious about other humans,
Yes.
then so much, if not all, of the fear and the ableism and the like, whoa, that person's in a wheelchair, has a prosthetic, uses a feeding tube, has a facial difference, like all of that, it's like the air gets let out of the balloon when we are curious about real people
Yes.
and the real experience, because everyone has a different life experience. And just being curious about people is natural and not scary.
Yes. And our nervous system and again, just a little neuroscience, which I'm sure you know, but curiosity is a frontal cortex executive function. Fear is a limbic brain, nervous system, sympathetic nervous system function. And so when we access curiosity, when we actually allow ourselves to become curious, the part of our brains that fuel fight, flight, and freeze turns off. So it really is the way to stay connected, the way to move forward, the way to engage, the way to grow is through curiosity. And many people, to your point, especially those of us who have not had a personal experience around this sort of topic, any kind of disability really, can go into fear mode. And then we stop paying attention. When we're in fear, we're not noticing. So, Kelley, you just said something really profound. And I think that it's going to help us connect with this sort of final piece, final chapter of our conversation. You said, my boys love each other. They're really good friends. And you also said something like, it's all they know, right? It's like, it just is. And I am a really big advocate for this idea that we as mothers have to go first. That if I, as a mother, want my children to get along and love each other fully and unconditionally, I have to first learn how to love each of my children unconditionally and fully. Because we send these unconscious messages to our kids all the time. What I will say is our children breathe in the air we breathe out. So I don't know whether or not you're going to embrace this or deflect it, who knows, but I, as a maternal mental health specialist who knows the deep interconnection between maternal and child mental health, would say, your sons are close, and Sean has embraced and embodied Aaron the way he has because you have done that first. So their closeness, their connection, their acceptance of each other is because you have gotten yourself to a place where you have fully accepted not only who Aaron is and clearly also who Sean is, but the feelings of discomfort that are going to come up for you when either of your children presents in ways that are unpredictable and uncertain and, whatever word you want to use. So Sean has learned from you, I think is what I'm saying. There could be a whole different story here where Sean is afraid of his brother or so uncomfortable with the feelings that come up for him when he's sitting with him or when he comes into the room that he has to do something to get away from his discomfort, right? There could be a whole other story here, but that's not your family's story. And it started with you and your husband, of course. So tell us, please, if you would, what your journey has been, what you've needed to do within yourself to be able to get to this place where you are holding such love and acceptance and curiosity for what is in your family. What helped you get here?
Many things. first, as we've said, the validating, whether it is siblings who are afraid of or upset or anxious about one another, don't tell them not to feel that way. Validate that. Um, first figuring out like, yes, this is how I'm feeling and that is okay. Getting from the, I feel like I'm in this bottomless pit to where I am now has been a huge journey. The biggest factors in that journey are number one, getting to know and even following online actual real life disabled people. Because if we're getting information about disability from disabled individuals, then disability is just a natural part of life as it is.
Yes.
That has been huge. Also, putting systems in place for all of the paperwork and the stuff and all of the moving parts and for when things fall apart, just having systems in place has allowed me the mental space to even regain curiosity, which for years I felt like I didn't have. And being in fight or flight for many years.
Right. And by the way, sorry to interrupt, but makes sense.
Yes.
Right. I mean, many of us, when we are in acute crisis, that's when fight or flight serves us. You're not making the crisis up. So that's your brain and body doing what it needs to do to move through a crisis. So it makes sense that you're in fight or flight.
Yes. And I have been in constant crisis mode for the better part of the past decade.
Yes.
And in many ways, it has served me well. And it is only very recently that I feel I'm coming out of that. And I still jump right back into it when we need to. And the number one thing that has gotten me from point A to point B, oh, here I got him to try again, is just loving my kid. And at the beginning, when everyone was telling me what a tragedy this was, I was hearing that. And of course, I loved my baby because he's my baby. But without knowing him, and he loves airplanes and is the mayor of Trader Joe's and is like, loves to play in the rain and all these great things. And there's nothing pitiable about all of that.
No.
And just loving your kids as they are, you can't force yourself to get to a part of the journey that you are not ready to reach. But loving your kids will take you there when you are ready to be there.
That is profound. Because my work is all around emotional, mental, psychological health. One of the things that is really hard for people to understand until they've experienced it is that all emotions are wise. And one of the things that you said has been helpful for you in raising these two boys who just are with you. They're brothers. That's just what they are, just like any other pair of brothers, is you said validating how they feel. We don't know how to really do that, and we don't do that well until we know how to do that for ourselves first. And that's part of what I hear in many ways you've done. Maybe you've quote unquote had to do it. I would be curious to know, although again, we probably won't go into it because we don't have time if you've always been this way, but it certainly sounds to me like you have given yourself permission to feel all of it, so that truly landing in the just isness of loving your son is not about what emotions you're feeling at the time. So that you can allow yourself to truly love your son exactly as he is and feel sad, disappointed, angry, scared at the same time.
Yes. Absolutely. And the sad, disappointed, scared, angry, all of that is not at him and who he is not at disability as a whole. That's not the tragedy, but just all of the stuff that goes into this. And I am allowed to be sad and fearful when he's having a seizure and we're calling 911, and when the pharmacy didn't messed up the medication, and
Not
like,
only are you allowed, but it would be really flippin' weird if you weren't. Like,
thank
that's a
you. Yes.
healthy response. That is a healthy response. We're just going to inject this because it's important for us all to remember. The definition of mental health is that our internal emotional experience is matching what's happening externally. If your son is having a seizure, you're going to feel scared. If you didn't, I would worry about you. If the pharmacy is messing up all of the things you're going to feel frustrated. If you didn't, I would worry about you. So that internal experience of emotion that matches the external experience is part of how we define mental health. It goes the other way too. If your son is sitting in his wheelchair with his feeding tube and he gives you a big smile and he's giggling at the rain outside the window and you feel joy, that's mental health.
Yes.
If you didn't, I would worry about you, right? So it goes both ways. The second part, which is I think the part that we're addressing right now, is the other side of mental health, is that we have healthy coping strategies to help us move from the more hard, complicated, uncomfortable emotions to the more pleasant emotions, that we know how to move from one to another, that we don't get stuck in either or, right? So of course you're feeling scared, disappointed, sad. I mean, of course, it would be weird if you didn't.
Absolutely. And as you said, there are so many positive coping mechanisms, and for people, I've been fortunate that I've been able to lean on those. I have friends who have fallen into very negative coping mechanisms, and for anyone who finds themselves, drinking too much, substances, negativity, over eating, like whatever the negative coping mechanism is, do your best to not shame yourself if that is the loop that you have fallen into. And do not be ashamed of the fact that that's where it has happened, and know that there are people who are very well trained in helping to pull you out of that loop and make you feel better than you did even before you needed those mechanisms.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes that's all we know,
Mm-hmm.
right? And it's not healthy functioning, but it's clever. If I'm having all these big feelings and I don't know how to sit with them or I don't know how to move them, it's pretty clever to reach for a bottle of booze or to reach for my phone or to over exercise or to it's sort of clever, but there are other ways that are more healthy that aren't going to have the repercussions that those things have, right?
Absolutely. And early on in my journey, I was sitting with a therapist, and everyone should go to therapy who's considering it because it's wonderful. And I was saying, my friends are saying they're worried about me and I should take a yoga class, but I don't want to take a yoga class because I would just go into the room and cry and watch these carefree, bendy 20 somethings, and that sounds miserable.
Yep.
And the therapist said, right now, your to-do list is your yoga. And that totally reframed self-care for me. When I feel like everything is out of control, I make a list of things and I'm like, okay, I'm going to get that insurance reimbursement. I'm going to follow up on the school therapy plan that's not being enacted. I'm going to like do a thing because that gives me some sense of agency and control, because there is so much we cannot control. And once we are honest about all the things we cannot control, it can feel good and productive to have control over these things, because then we feel like we are serving ourselves and our children and our family. And that gives us the space to, take 20 yoga classes if you want, walk around the block, whatever that healthy thing is. it gives you the space to find that healthy place. And so many of us in extreme parenting situations don't have the space to even want to do those things. And sometimes figuring out all the super boring, rotten paperwork stuff is what you need to do to give you the space to want these other things for yourself.
Oh, I love that so much, because in a world where there's so much that's not in your control, that's not in our control, and we feel like we have no agency, we feel anxious there. And when we can bring our focus back to the things that are in our control, which is the choices we choose to engage with or the actions we're taking, we feel better, whether that's a yoga class or your darn to-do list, right? Kelley, as we wrap up, I want to come back to this idea of the universality. I don't know if that's a true word, but that's the word that I wanted to use. Okay, good. Of what it's like for a family where there's a child with any type of disability or anything, and the mom in the role of mother of that family, and mothers that would not necessarily hear themselves in this life journey that you've been on. I want to bring us back where we can actually wrap it all together. And really, Kelley, what we're all looking for is a feeling. All we want is a feeling in life, right? We're like, I'm going to buy that sweater. It's not that I want the sweater. It's that I want the feeling that I believe that sweater is going to give me when I wear it, right? It's not the vacation I want. It's the feeling I believe that I'm going to have when I take that vacation. So what we're all looking for is a feeling. And what I think we're all looking for when we become parents is a feeling. What does this family feel like? What am I going to feel like when I become a mother? And the mistake we make, as we started with, is the assumption that things need to look or be a certain way in order for us to access that feeling. And you, Kelley Coleman, have turned that on its head for us today. So I would love to wrap up with you telling us what it feels like to be a part of your family, what it feels like to be a mom.
What it feels like to be a part of our family is the chaos and the beauty, and it feels like everything. Everything all at the same time. I think so many families who are not walking this path, or who aren't yet walking this path and don't know that they will be walking it soon, um, we can all not only be curious about one another, but we can recognize, especially in looking at these extreme parenting and caregiving instances in families like ours, rather than saying, I could never do what you do, you would do what I do, because you would have to. You would not have a choice. We are all doing what our children need, what our families need, and what we need, and embracing the mess of it. And as we're looking at what is universal, we can look at, there will be mess, always and often and in unpredictable ways in all of our lives, parents or not. But looking at how others around us embrace all of the mess, we can start to see ways that we can lean into the messiness and embracing that. It doesn't mean we have to be excited about it, doesn't mean we have to be falsely positive about it, but all the things. And so being part of our family, it feels like all the things.
Oh, man. What a beautiful place for us to wrap up. You have said a number of words and given us a number of examples of what I imagine it must feel like in your family. And if it's okay with you, I want to reflect back what I've heard you say.
Yes.
That being in your family, Kelley, is about immense amounts of curiosity, love, connection, joy, humor, confidence, and capability. And isn't that what we all want when we
Yes.
consider becoming parents? A life where our family embodies those things. And how amazing it is. What a gift it is, Kelley, for us today to be reminded that those things are there for us, regardless of what the situations or how our family looks, or the certain situations that are a part of that family system don't determine whether or not we have access to what we want most. It's the most important reminder for us. So thank you for showing us what that can look like, what that looks like. It's we all need that as a reminder. So thank you.
Thank you. And even in the hard, as you said, we can access, maybe not in the immediate moment, but we can access all of those things. We all get to experience all of those things. You do not have to deserve them. You are here, and so you deserve them.
Kelley, thank you for being with us today. Before we stop recording, and we'll have all of this in the show notes, where can people find you? Where can they learn more about you? Where can they find you?
So my website is the easiest place to find me, kelleycoleman.com, and that's Kelley, Coleman.com. And my book, Everything No One Tells You About Parenting a Disabled Child. I'm going to cry again. Everything no one tells you about parenting a disabled child, your guide to the essential systems, services, and supports is available at all the book places. And I really look forward to sharing this journey with your audience and your community.
Kelley, my mama heart feels your mama heart.
You know,
Yeah. Thanks for being here with us today.
thank you.
Hey, listeners, we sure hope you enjoyed that episode. And if you did, we would really love for you to share this with a friend. So here's the deal. We're all in this together. And as a community of moms, we need to make sure that no one is left alone. So you can help us with that. Please share this episode or other episodes that you found useful for you. Please consider writing a review and rating this podcast, because when you do, it actually makes it more accessible to other moms who might be looking for podcasts that they would also find useful. So we are so grateful you're here. And if you were interested in just taking a minute or two to share and rate and review, Deb and I would be so grateful. Thank you for mothering with us.